So Bart Nagel, what can I say? Bart Nagel was the art director of MONDO 2000. He took a raggedy-ass little magazine called Reality Hackers, a passable first issue of MONDO 2000, designed basically by Queen Mu, although she refused to use a computer. She sat by somebody else's side and designed a credible first issue of Mondo. And then Bart Nagel came into the mix and became a legendary art director, one of the most beautiful magazines in history. So the introduction I prepared says Bart Nagel is a visual architect behind some of the most iconic Mondo 2000 imagery, a master of photography and digital collage. Bart helped crystallize the look and feel of early cyberdelic culture. Tonight, he'll take us on a brief visual tour through the singular aesthetic era. Really is very disconcerting talking when everybody else is talking, but anyway, Bart will be with us. It is the Gulf of Deliria, so it's all good.
I'm not sure why that signal isn't there now.
Well, that was what I was going to say. Just waiting for the technology, as usual. All right, so let me begin here and zoom through this as quickly as possible. The story of me at Mondo started at this mysterious and poorly photographed house up in the Berkeley Hills. I had just arrived in the Bay Area to work on another publication, and my roommate had run into Allison Kennedy at a copy shop in downtown Berkeley where she was handing out the first issue of Mondo 2000. The one seen here with Todd Rundgren on the cover. My friend looked at the magazine and said, "Hey, you need an art director." So he came home, brought me the magazine, and told me to call Allison. I arranged to come up to the Mondo house, and she lived just up the hill from Fred, my friend, so it was like an easy trip up. I arrived and I immediately misgendered Ken when he answered the door, and then embarrassing. And then he took me to meet Allison, who was in the kitchen, and we spent probably the next 45 minutes, an hour, just chatting about stuff. I had a really ridiculously slim portfolio of graphic design. But Allison was very ebullient. She was making me tea. She was actually cooking strawberry shortcake while we talked. And then finally, at the end of a long sort of social moment, she said, what sign are you? And I told her I was a Pisces, and she said, "I think this will work out great." So I had no experience really designing on the computer or any computer at all. But my friend Fred had a Macintosh SE30, and he had a copy of Quark Express on it, and I started learning how to use it. Meanwhile, I was waiting for the editorial to come in from the writers at Mondo. I went up once a week to the house, and at the very least collected a check, if not words to lay out. So this went on for several weeks. Finally, the text arrived, and I started laying out, and then produced this issue of Mondo 2000. Thank you. I was very naive, and I thought, you know what will really sell a magazine is an upside-down face. So I photographed Diana Trimble in Jazz Morgan, our music director's hot tub, and thus the first cover was born. So what I needed most was artists to fill out the magazine to go along with the text. And I had one strict rule, which is that there were no fractals allowed in the magazine. No fractals. If you saw fractal in Mondo, it was probably in an ad. I didn't approve it. Anyway, so I started laying out the magazine. An artist named Mark Landman came and introduced himself, and he was already working on the computer doing design. And I'm sorry that this black and white version doesn't do it justice. It was really, really nice stuff and very advanced looking to me in 1990. Anyway, Mark really gave me a big boost by getting his art into the magazine. Now, since I had photographed Diana for the cover, I also went to her loft and photographed her and Barbara Imhoff for the inside of the magazine. And I essentially hired myself to be the photographer at no additional charge to the magazine. We also got photographs supplied for, I'm not sure who this is, Mark Pauline, who is this? Really great stuff. I wish that we'd had a color magazine at this point to show these incredible pieces. So I just want to go back a little bit. I had no magazine design experience at all. I had been living in Phoenix, Arizona, and I had a creative life in the 80s. I was in a art rock band. I was just starting graphic design. I was a fashion icon. And I had art shows of my photography. Going back further, in high school, I became a guitar maker. And at age 19, I built a guitar that I sold to Frank Zappa, which became his most favorite guitar. And he's not here to say otherwise. I also then built the world's first solid body electric lute for Steve Howe of Yes. That's me on the left. I also was a sound engineer for the biggest band in Phoenix at the time, the Jetsons, which would have broken big if it hadn't been for heroin. So anyway, back to Mondo. This was the first logo that was designed by Broom Bear. And now here was Mark Landman showing me some of his work in color. So my goal was to try to marry like the weird words with some weird art. Now this did not appear in the magazine, but I like the idea of a fetal Elvis out there in the world. So now we come to the cover of issue 3. We had photographed Deborah Harry at the Warfield during the Escape from New York tour. And Queen Moo, aka Allison Kennedy, thought that Deborah Harry would be perfect on the cover, except for Ken. Oh, hey, is Allison here? Sorry, my bad. Come back. Okay. So Mark was using like the very first iteration of Photoshop. He had downloaded a beta copy of Photoshop 0.9 from a BBS, if any of you remember those. This one was called Worthless Slime. And he gave a copy to me, but I hadn't learned how to use it yet. So we worked on this at his house up in Cotati. We had gotten an image from NASA of the Eagle Nebulae, and we spent several hours on a very slow machine trying to put this together. Here's the evolution of the Mondo logo. That first one by Broom Bear, and the second one was sort of a smoothed out, slightly less digital looking version by an artist named Wolfgang Gersh. And then the third version, the third and final version, is the one that Pixar did for us. We'd been showing the magazine at SIGGRAPH, and some people from Pixar wandered by and said, you know, your logo looks like it's 3D, but it's not 3D. So they offered to do this for us for free, which took weeks. So we would spend a day describing what the letter was. The letter M is neon. The letter N is lipstick. The letter D is a silicon chip. And the O, of course, is an Ouroboros. So we would describe a letter, and then the artist there would take 3 or 4 days to render it in RenderMan. So I would do this one letter at a time for weeks. But I think it turned out great. One of the biggest things for me was to find this artist, Eric White. He had just graduated from RISD and moved to San Francisco, and I just immediately fell in love with his work, and I thought it would be a good match for the kind of stuff that we were doing. It was a little bit retro, but it was very handcrafted. So this is one of his pieces. And then I got him to render an image of Dirk and Sandy, who were writers in Mondo and advertisers in Mondo, and an odd-looking couple at the very least. And Eric made them even odder. They sent me a package of Thermogen tea once, which is what they advertised in the magazine. Gave me the worst stomach ache I've ever had. Don't take Thermogen tea. So now we get to the spine of Mondo. The first issue that we did with Deborah Harry was in color, and it was so thick that we had to go to what is called a perfect bound spine. And when it came out, an artist named John Baruso asked me why there wasn't anything on that spine. So from that moment on, he was tasked with creating imagery for every spine that we produced thereafter. Most of the time, he just came up with the theme himself. For issue number 9, I felt that had to do with the Beatles somehow. Number 9. So he took that and he created a sequence on the spine of my guitar gently weeping, turning into a glass onion, and then ending up in the pipe of the Fool on the Hill. Now, this is my first photoshopped image, photographed by Stephanie Rouser, but she didn't leave enough headroom for us to put the logo above the head. So I figured this out, how to add sand to an image. And this was a deal at the time, okay? It was a deal. While I was designing the magazine, I would often do placeholder cover lines on the top. And Allison had written a story about Jim Morrison dying of penis cancer. So I thought, all right, Jim Morrison, spoil the rod and despair. I believe this was a favorite headline of Rudy Rucker. Some fashion stuff that Stephanie shot for the inside. Queen Moo thought it was important that we have a fashion section, not just for readers, but for advertisers. And I believe that she believed that. Now here's Mark Landman again, getting more sophisticated in his Photoshop work, turning Brian Eno into stone. I'm just going to show some spreads now. This is just stuff that I like. You can see that the design becomes a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit cleaner. This is a John Baruso illustration again. Great stuff. We got to mess around quite a bit with the contents pages, all Photoshop stuff, heavily Photoshop. Pamela Z is here, I hear. Is she here? The beautiful Pamela Z. More contents pages, more white space. I was very fortunate that Queen Moo was really behind the design. She was the one who insisted that we get a heavier weight paper, that we print in 4-color, and that we leave white space for people to navigate around. And so I'm very indebted to her for helping me sort of progress my design ideas. Some more wacky stuff. This one by Errol Otis, Jill Greenberg. Here's a piece by Tom Pitts, and in that lower left-hand corner, Cintra Wilson, who will be turning up here very soon. This was a photographer, Joseph Kultice, who was a friend of mine from Phoenix, who used to shoot for the New Times Weekly there, and always brought like an interesting perspective to these photographs. It's my shot of Diamante Galas, but I like this layout because I was getting better at sort of shaping the text and incorporating, again, more white space. This was a fun article that was shot by Steven Stickler and conducted by David Turin, who gave them Rorschach tests, which I think is probably the first magazine that has done such a thing. That wasn't Psychology Today. It's my shot of gore. My biggest fear was getting covered in fake sperm and blood. Or real sperm and blood, for that matter. Lovely illustration by Joe Soren. Oops, let me go back one. Jill Greenberg collage. Douglas Winter. Another heavily photoshopped image. We had supplied the photographs of the sarcophagus made out of old computer or printed circuit chips. And I scanned those and incorporated those into the background. Another one of our fashion spreads. And I have to say that this is not the first time that we gender confused people in here. The men are women, the women are men. I think we had kind of a head start a little bit in the, for mainstream magazine having transgender people in it. So two of my favorite covers. The one on the left by Eric White, sort of announcing that JFK was the first psychedelic president. And the second shot by me of Jane Siberry. You can see it. We're getting cleaner on the covers because do cover lines really sell magazines? Does Mondo get bought because it's on the newsstand or because people are seeking it out? So I love just being able to like eliminate as much of the text as possible. So Eric White went on to become a fine art painter. Lives in LA now. He shows in galleries in Los Angeles, New York, and Amsterdam. And he's collected by Leonardo DiCaprio, David Arquette, and by me. This is my piece. So this is the grid of the 17 issues of Mondo that came out. So on the bottom row, second from the left, I need to call out Barbara Lou, who's here tonight. Say hi to her. Her head is still shaved, easy to find. So right, this is from 1989 until 1998, 17 magazines. And I used to say that Mondo 2000 was a quarterly publication that came out at least 3 times a year, but man, that math is wrong. So in the meantime, during the course of the magazine, we did a book for HarperCollins, edited by Rudy Rucker there, his younger self there on the left. We got featured in Newsweek. We made the cover of Time, which Time magazine asked me to design. This one featuring a photograph of Heidi Foley, who was my assistant art director. And since I mentioned Rudy Rucker, I should also announce that Georgia Rucker, who was our associate art director, is here tonight with her dad. Say hi to her when you have a chance. She was a wonderful presence in the art room and just kind of did everything we asked her to do, and then some. Outside of Mondo, St. Jude and RUCH and I did a book for Random House, just totally trying to capitalize on whatever notoriety we had with the Cyberpunk handbook. Post-Mondo, I stopped designing and became a photographer and shot for publications like Sports Illustrated, where I photographed Richard Branson. This is a no Photoshop image. We actually had birds flying through the studio. I also photographed Jeannie Buss, the president and owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. This photo was recently recreated in the Netflix series Running Time, with starring Kate Hudson. I also started photographing titans of Silicon Valley, like Larry Ellison with his private jet. And I did local shops, local businesses like Google with Larry and Sergey. And PayPal founder Peter Thiel. And if you're not booing billionaires right now, I don't know what's wrong with you. I spend time these days inviting friends over to be photographed, so Rudy Rucker came over with his space weapons and knocked out a few. And of course, I'm always happy to have Mr. R.U. Series in the studio as we continue, now 35 years later, talking about Mondo 2000. And finally, during the pandemic, I built another guitar. And that's it. Thank you for listening.